Hello, gorgeous, divine, beautiful intuitives. Welcome to International Intuitives, or as Michelle said, one of our international intuitive speakers, Riff with Tiff. And, and haven't we got a treat for you guys today? Hopefully you're coming. Hopefully you're seeing. It takes a while for Facebook to warm up. But yes, as we said that, we're getting the magic, we're getting people coming. I'm so excited about who we've got with us today because she's more than just my twin next door, is our Becky Walsh. And so we're going to try and fit this live into 30 minutes max.
Okay.
Okay, Becky?
Yeah, that's fine.
Speed talking.
For anyone whose English is not their first language, I apologise. Just when you replay it, slow it down, and then you'll be able to understand what I'm saying, because I talk really fast anyway. Give me a time frame.
Me too.
I can fit everything in.
Okay, so you guys, are you ready for this? Because you've got two very fast talking intuitives. Okay, so I really don't know where to start because I've known about Becky since about 2010. And that was because I was working in mysteries in Covent Garden. And Becky, you were working in Buddha in a bicycle.
Buddha on a, yeah. But I don't know if I knew you before then when I was working at Watkins. No. So
no.
it would have been Buddha, yeah. So I was at, because it was Watkins.
You didn't even know me then. I just knew of you.
Yeah, you didn't. They were kind of like in conflict with each other. And mysteries still owe me money.
I'm not surprised.
They sold a load of my CDs and never paid me. I mean, I'm not bitter about it, but the worst of it is, the problem is at the time I was classed as a psychic, and you can't go and have a go at anyone about that, because if anyone steals from you, they say, when you're a psychic, you should have known. And it's like, yes, I'm also a really open-hearted, loving person who gives people the benefit of the doubt twice.
Yeah.
2 lots of CDs did they rob off me, but we'll move on. It's been hard times for everyone. We'll move on. It's perfectly fine. It went wrong for them in the long run, because when I got the radio show on LBC, I did 0 advertising for them, and everybody else got a massive big up. So what they made in CD sales, they lost in advertising revenue that they would have got for a cult-based followed show. So and to you.
And that's karma for you, isn't it? So karma. There we go. There's a real story or experience about how that happens already. So you're already hearing that me and Becky go a long way back, but it's been like never the twain shall meet. It's like these parallels that are fascinating. And I really want to fast forward to the San Francisco part, because that was where you started studying what goes on for intuitives, and from a scientific perspective.
Yeah, from a tri-brain perspective, because this is the thing, I think what happened was, I was very lucky. I had a lot of lucky breaks, and I ended up becoming really quite famous, to the point where Derren Brown, in his book Tricks of the Mind, has described me as a brazen cow. And of course, as you will get to know, he was completely right about that.
What? Explain.
The brazen cow, which is brilliant. What a great thing. And I actually used it as posters for my stand-up show, kind of like, where they put kind of like, the New Yorker says, blah, blah, blah. Metro says, she's amazing. Derren Brown says, brazen cow. I just thought was great. And I wanted to put it kind of like everywhere. But I kind of became extremely successful and really quite well known. And what happens when that happens, if you're well known for something, that in the eyes of some people, you're a fake, you're a fraud, you're a liar, you manipulate people, you're a terrible human being. And in the eyes of other people, oh, could you just talk to my angels? Could you talk to my angels for me? And I'm like, oh, fuck. If I could talk to your angels, I'd be talking to my freaking... What are you talking about? And so you're hailed as being kind of like, disciple of God on one hand, and then on the other hand as a liar. And somewhere down the middle is all of the lost conversations, because nobody ever talks to you about anything else, not even your friends. And suddenly everything becomes dramatic.
That's right.
Like I remember being at a dinner party,
and
a couple were arguing, and as I was leaving and getting in a taxi, the host of the party says, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry about that." She goes, "I'm really worried about them." I said, "Yeah, it doesn't look good." She goes upstairs and goes, "Becky's predicted that you're going to split up."
No.
And then I spent the rest of the evening with a crying girlfriend on the phone. And I think when you've got that amount of stuff going on, the only thing that you can possibly do is have a bit of a breakdown. So I just reached this point where I'd lost sense of myself. I never did future predictions. I didn't believe in them. I already believed in the law of attraction and manifestation by that time. So I felt that future predictions were unethical. That was just me. And I didn't understand how it worked. And I didn't understand how a lot of things worked, and that spirit moves in mysterious ways was not happening. So I grabbed the dog, and sold my flat in London, and I moved to San Francisco to study everything that there was about the brain. So I did a correspondence course in parapsychology with Edinburgh University. I was studying interdisciplinary studies at CIIS, and then I just dove my head into as much neuroscience as I could find. And what started to emerge coincidentally was that I was asked to create for my course an anthology, and we had to go and work with someone in the library. And so I went into the library and was talking my anthology through with the librarian, who just looks at me and goes, "Nope, this is a book." And I went, "Funny she said that, I've written a book." And she went, no, this is another book. I'm like, "Okay." And she said, "It's got knowing, knowing, it's about knowing, it's got knowing in the title." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And weirdly, I actually gave Hay House a bunch of different titles before I actually gave them the one that she'd given me in the first place. This woman was the woman who edited Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. And what was bizarre was, as I was reading A New Earth, Eckhart Tolle describes the fact that he was living in London and had to leave London and move to San Francisco in order to write this book. And that intuitive nudge, which felt more like an elbow on the side of a cliff edge, took me to San Francisco to write this book. And whilst writing it, I just dove into everything that there was to know. And I discovered that not only do you have like the right hemisphere of the brain being the receiver of information, so that's where your intuition goes. But when we talk about a gut instinct, we're not kidding, because we've actually got a brain in our gut that has neurons, and it's connected via the vagus nerve, and it has pretty much the same amount of neurons in our head as we also have in our gut, but not only that, in our heart as well. So our heart has a brain and our gut has a brain. And most people follow gut instinct because we're taught that the world is scary and what to avoid. So your gut instincts will go avoid, avoid, avoid. And people say I always follow my gut, but because we are designed, sorry, dog's scratching, because we are designed to survive, you are constantly looking for danger. That's how we're wired, So he's a twat. He's not very nice. What's going on with that? I don't like that. Blah, blah, blah. So we're looking for skullduggery. But when you engage your heart-led intuition, you engage three concepts, which is love, curiosity, and purpose. Heart opens, and the world looks like a completely different place. It's like when you go travelling, and you know how the opportunity of getting laid suddenly doubles or triples, and people help you with your bag because you're curious about the new environment. Well, when you open your heart chakra, the same thing happens. When you open this heart brain, the same thing happens. But curiosity is key in order to be able to do that. And it needs purpose, and it definitely needs love. And when you're engaging between, if your gut brain says avoid, your heart brain can then be curious about why you want to avoid, and then you discover that this person, very nice person, reminds you of your humiliating maths teacher at school. And then you suddenly realise that this is the key to unlocking your unconscious bias. So sometimes our gut instincts are not just intuition, but but it's also our gut brain going, oh, we've seen this before, let's avoid that, or we've been taught about that, or we have preconceived ideas about that. So when it comes to actually expanding your own human psychology and the levels of awareness in the physical world, it's just what you need to be doing. When you take that and start using different levels of intuition, so of course you've got empathy, your emotional intuition, then you've got your spiritual intuition, which is your like crown chakra, then you've got your brain, which is your mental intuition, but you've also got your somatic intuition, so what's going on with your body. When you put all of those in kind of connection with a collective consciousness, that's when you are able to download like huge wisdoms. And I got this from taking ayahuasca. When I wanted to finish You Do Know, I couldn't finish the book. So I took an ayahuasca journey to be able to download something that would be impactful to humanity for the next God knows how long. And when I'm in this trip, you kind of like have this sort of like voice talking to you. And it went, don't know why you're doing this. I mean, why didn't you just open your freaking heart and and just, you know how to do this without that? And you can hear collective consciousness, and you can hear, you know, the levels of wisdom that are beyond the physical vibration. I don't know why you're doing this. I was like, oh, well, that was a waste of near-death experience. So it wasn't quite like that. So that was the journey of San Francisco. And suddenly, at one moment, I was standing at a garage sale, and I was looking at some clothes, and then the rail collapsed in my arms, and I'm holding the rail, and this girl tutted at me, and I went, I'm going home. I literally just stood around and said, I'm going home. And then I came back, and I didn't move back to London, but I moved to Bristol and now Weston-super-Mare.
Which is
Told you to talk fast.
Fascinating because of a parallel. But before we go there, Lisa is saying she absolutely agrees. Using the 3 brains in therapeutic facilitated session is so powerful in unlocking potential. And I know that we've got people live here, and I've said to them to bring questions because we've got the Becky Walsh here. If you ever wanted to know anything about being intuitive, this woman, I mean, you've got to imagine, me and Becky were like a few streets away from each other working as psychics around 2010. Then in 2012, I got published by John Hunt, which was your first publisher. So you had already published Advanced Psychic Development. And when did that get published for you?
God only knows. Hang on a minute. I'll go and have a look at the back of the book.
You guys put questions in whilst we're doing this timeline. It was before 2012 anyway. There you go. You got it.
What does it say on the back of the book? I can't even read it. Oh, it's in there somewhere.
It must be 2011 or 2010. And we have been interviewed by the same person, Simon Paul Sutton.
Yeah.
And he had hooked us up together. He asked you if you would give me a few pointers because the Transformational Truth of Tarot, which is behind me, not very well seen, was my first book through John Hunt. And you got on the phone with me and you helped me with that, knowing what to do and navigate it. You didn't know me from Adam. And those things, they stick with you, you know. It was like you gave up your free time and you didn't know me from Adam. You just got on the phone and helped me with that. But still, we hadn't met. And I don't think you really knew who I was. I'd heard of you. And then 2013, I ended up working on Psychic TV or Psychic Today. And they wanted you to sponsor them or something?
Yeah, they offered me a ridiculous amount of money to put my name to the channel.
Right.
And they wanted to put, so it would have been kind of like, you know, like a show would have been Becky Walsh's show, but it wouldn't have been me answering the phone. It would have been people that they had hired. And I said,
like me.
and I control freak. I said, I really would like to vet the people. Don't knock that out.
That's fair enough.
I really want to vet the people that you're going to hire. They said that wasn't possible. And then I was like, well, how can I put my name to something when I don't know what the quality of it is? And I turned it down. And, it's one of those things that you turn it down and you think, yeah, that would have paid off a bit of a chunk of my mortgage if I'd have taken that. But I think your name is everything, and I had built such a reputation for no nonsense, and I'd made a lot of sacrifices. I mean, Darren Brown Production Company came back to me and they wanted me to go on his TV show. I'd invited him onto my radio show a bunch of times and he wouldn't come on. And when they had the control of the edit button and it wasn't live, he wanted to come on. And again, I got chucked money to do things that were out of integrity, and I never did them, and I never did them. Sometimes I look back and go, screw my integrity, I could do with a pension, but I'm really glad I didn't. I'm really, really glad I didn't.
It's like how you started saying about mysteries and the CDs and the karmic kind of whack, so at the time it can feel so costly, large picture, it's different, but it's fascinating. I think the trajectory. Lisa that's here also said John Hunt was 2012 for her. And I want to know
2007. I've just read on the book.
Oh, okay. So a few years previous. Wow. In terms of when you went to San Francisco, because I had exactly the same thing as you've just described. I think it may well be being quite a successful psychic in London. It's like everybody just sees you as a walking psychic rather than a person, right? And you do get to that point where you have a breakdown. So I had a breakdown and went to San Francisco. That was in 2016. When did you go to San Francisco? San Fris.
God, you're much better at dates than I am. I honestly, off the top of my head, without looking it up, I don't know. So I know it was about like 10 years ago from where we are now. I was over there for 2 years, so it's sort of like talking 12, 13 years ago. There's something about the fault lines in San Francisco. There's something about the fault lines. When we talk about ley lines and energy lines, there's something about fault lines that call you. And it's like you're not where you're going, you're not where you've been. There's a liminal space on a fault line.
Makes sense.
And even though you don't really want to be in a high-rise building, if there's an earthquake or next to one, there's something about the energy of movement of the earth moves you in ways that it undoes your programming, it undoes the things you were hanging on to out of fear or insecurity. It shakes you, in the way that the plates kind of. I remember living through an earthquake while I was there, and it was one that kind of like went side to side and then up, crash. So it was very much like being on a ship, and you can feel the crack as you hit. And I remember just feeling the earth's energy just coming up, and I knew I was completely safe because I was still rubbing the dog's belly, laying on the bed, and the dog was unbothered until it was all over. Probably just didn't even notice, just kind of like, oh, belly rub. But I think I could feel the uprising of the energy before it happened. And I was like, I feel amazing. Oh, it's the oxytocin, rubbing the dog's belly. And then suddenly that happened, and I was like, whoa, that's intense. It's really intense. So I think that something calls you about that, to those kinds of places. And interestingly, where I am at the moment is Bristol is on a fault line. So you don't all have to go to San Francisco, just head to Bristol. The Bristol Channel has its own fault line. And so when I came back, I was like, no wonder I've ended up on another freaking fault line. But now I'm on a fault line and a ley line. Just explode.
I did hear that there was a... because I'm not too far away from you, surprise, surprise, in Bath now. And I did hear that there was an earthquake in Bath a few months ago.
Yeah.
It was all over the Bath kind of like Facebook part. And it was just like, really? Wow. Okay. So we're drawn, by the sounds of it, something in us is drawn to these places because of
Yeah.
the energy,
Yeah,
the
I
ley
think so.
lines, the fault lines. What's the difference between a fault line and a ley line?
So a ley line is kind of like, if you imagine it to be, your acupuncture kind of your energy center, like your energy lines. So it's the energy that runs through the earth. So it's like the energy, like lines that go through the earth in the same way that your acupuncture points would be. I know there's a word for it, can't remember it right now, but it doesn't really matter. The fault lines are more about where the Earth's plate shift. So what you're talking about there is more the kind of like North Pole, South Pole energetic plates. So if you imagine the difference between physical body energy systems as opposed to kind of like astral body energy systems if we were the Earth.
Yes, I've got you. Okay. So as we're talking about locations, there's a question here from Gail, who's in Cornwall. So when she says she wanted to see you live in Bristol, sounds like she will travel still, but she says here, do you have plans to go on stage with your show? What exactly is your show? What does she mean when she says your show?
It started off by, I was calling it the stand-up psychic show. So you know how you get kind of like psychics kind of standing on stage and quite often they're talking to dead people, but that's not very funny. So I found that I have a love of stand-up comedy. It started when I was sharing a flat with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost and realised how much money Simon was on. And I mean, there was a couple of things. There's a stand-up comedian that I met on a ship called Sam, and he was like, my God, you're such a funny lady, you're genuinely funny. And then when I was living with Simon and Nick, and the banter in the flat and how you riff and kind of, and then when I was in San Francisco, and of course I worked in theatre at the time, and so I was around comedians. I was at drama school with, I'm just going to keep dropping. But I was actually, let's just stop there. Martin Freeman. Anyway, so loads of people who have gone on to be really successful. When I'm standing at a bus stop, they're on the side of the bus. That's how successful they are. And so I kind of think that this has always been a part of my life in some way, the comedy. So when I was in San Francisco, I trained in a therapeutic thing called playback theatre. And I'd already been doing the stand-up. So I trained in playback theatre, I trained in family constellations. And I just love being on stage. I'm happier on stage than in a one-to-one conversation. And so I started mixing intuitive readings with stand-up comedy. And I didn't, it was completely improv comedy. So it was all based on what was coming off the audience. So I might hold something like doing some psychometry that belonged to somebody and then riff into a massive story about myself and about something that had happened that was funny. The person who owned the object knew that the story I was telling was a metaphor, but nobody else in the audience did. They thought I was just coming out with some cracking comedy, and then I'd come back and tell her something else. Amazing. Which wasn't personal, not as personal as the story I was telling. So that became a really popular show. I then changed the name of that when I ditched the word psychic because of writing the book. I realised that there's nothing psychic. Psychic is a loaded word that means supernatural abnormal powers, and who needs that? But intuitive makes more sense. And actually people with a high level of intuition are quite often dyslexic as well. So this is a skill caused by a brain abnormality, in the same way as someone with autism may be really great with dates, names, numbers, maths, and all of that kind of thing. But it's very interesting that if you have an ability, people call you a fake, but if you have a disability, people form a charity. So I think that there's abilities that are caused by disabilities in the way that the brain works. So that's a little side hustle. So when I buried the word psychic and just twisted it and changed it to intuitive, and then everybody started doing that, I noticed. And Kindred Spirit also credited me for actually having shifted the wording and the thought process around psychics. So moving on from that, I changed the name of the show but continued to do it. And now, obviously with COVID and everything, and I sort of slowed down doing the shows just whilst other stuff was going on. But because of COVID, the minute it wasn't possible to get on stage anymore, I was like, no! know. And so I found a thing called Clubhouse, which for anyone who hasn't found it, it's invite only, but I may have a few invites. And I've started doing the show on Clubhouse. But on Clubhouse, it's quite difficult because Clubhouse is very full of people seeking help. So people coming to the stage are expecting therapy or coaching, and there's a different vibe. So I haven't been able to do the stand-up because I haven't been able to use the toys and the props and the gimmick stuff that can lighten an atmosphere. So I've started working with a chap called Brian Kaplan. Now, Brian is a Harley Street doctor, and he's been doing this work on what you might call, I'd kind of call it dare to disrupt therapy. It's not really therapy, but it's kind of like, it's provocative. And so someone will come with a question, something that they want. It can be anything. And then we have 1 minute to tell that person how to do it. But it's provocative. So it's not kind of like, well, if you really thought about this, that would make a really great thing. So the other day we had a lady saying, God, it's 7 o'clock every night, I have to have a glass of wine. And I don't think it's good for my health. I only drink 1 glass, but it's every single night, and I'd really like to stop. So my answer to that was, okay, start drinking at 4, 1 glass of wine, you know, and just drink it really, really slowly until 7. And I went, actually, better still, why not start at 10 o'clock? Gulp it down before you go to bed like medicine, like drink it back because wine is good for you. And you start with this thing and the person's killing themselves laughing. Then Brian's does his 1 minute. But what's really interesting is she no longer drinks the wine.
Oh, fantastic.
My work has always been like this. We have sub-personalities or archetypes, as you know, they're all in the tarot deck, all of these archetypes in the tarot deck. So if you've got an inner critic, what you're doing is you're coming with a problem about your critic, or you're coming with a problem about your perfectionist, or you're coming with a problem about, but it's never you. You know, you are the observer of all of these characters, your addictions, your problems, your issues, and never you. In fact, you are sober when you're drunk. When you're drunk and slurring your words, the awareness of being drunk is sober. And that's the real you. So when you come with the question, we are in some ways creating anarchy and disruption of the subpersonality. So when you attack the subpersonality and laugh at the subpersonality, when you are laughing at your subpersonality, you absolutely untangle the limiting belief wiring.
I get it.
That's now what I'm doing. So I'm using intuition, I'm reading what's actually going on, and I'm answering what's going on intuitively with comedy and disruptive kind of coaching, disruptive coaching. So instead of being all lovely and warm and fuzzy, I'm like, bollocks, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. And the person goes, because that's not what they're expecting. But a breakthrough happens, a trigger happens. And so I've just started doing this with Brian, and, you know, it's just genius. I'm having the best time.
It sounds
so much fun.
amazing. So, it sounds incredible. We have run out of time, but we've got one last question, and I'm going to give you 1 minute. I don't know if you can do the disruption thing for it, but I'm going to give you 1 minute because I'm supposed to be on a call. So you've got to stay in 1 minute, okay? It is, I remember reading recently Dr. Michael Mosley writing about the gut-brain connection. Bit of a weird question, perhaps, but do you think you can physically feed and strengthen your intuition?
With food, I guess, is the question to that.
With food. I think that's what,
no, but you can strengthen your immune system, which will really help with things like kefir or probiotics, anything like that. I think is a really good thing. I'm a big kombucha fan. So I would say the more you strengthen your gut, and also I really believe in fasting as well. So be careful with fasting. I'd say 14 to 16 hours is plenty, and that helps reboot your gut brain because it isn't spending so much time digesting junk like chips.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Becky. And thank you so much, everyone here live. We've got loads of comments, and I really appreciate your love and support. Becky, tell me clearly where your show is again, so people can come.
You can find me on Clubhouse on the Stand Up Intuitive show on Clubhouse, but if you just head over to my website, beckywalsh.com, you'll find everything that you need to find there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Becky. And we really look forward to having you on the 11th of the 11th when you'll be doing your Keep It Surreal talk. And guys, if you want to sign up and register on the wait list for that, the link is in the post. I could riff with you all day, but I really have to go.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for watching on the live.
Bye, everyone.